Well, I'm very excited about today's show because I'm always wanting to learn about the current research being done on things like all these chemicals, antibacterial soap and BPA, flame retardants in our mattresses, and nanotechnology in our makeup, and what we can do to stay healthy. Well, my guest today is a scientist who's an expert on chemicals that impact our health. Dr. Sarah Jansen has an MD and PhD in reproductive biology, as well as a master's degree in public health. And she makes good use of all of her academic training as a senior scientist at the NRDC, or the Natural Resources Defense Council, where she works on eliminating chemicals from products that have been associated with causing infertility and reproductive harm. Sarah has a young daughter, and like all parents, wants to protect her child from harm. But unlike many parents who just wish things could be different, Sarah's actually doing something to make things happen. Welcome to your supernatural life, Sarah.
Thank you.
So tell us about the antimicrobial chemicals in our hand soap and body wash and toothpaste, for example. You were quoted in a recent article that said that Triclosan has increased by over 40% in people's urine who were tested. So what kind of harm does that do to our bodies and the environment?
Well, Triclosan is a so-called antibacterial or antimicrobial chemical that's widely marketed to consumers in products like their hand soaps and toothpaste and body washes and powders. And it's fairly easy to find because it does actually show up on the label as an active ingredient. And we suspect that most people are being exposed because they apply these things to their skin. It's absorbed, or if you're using it in your toothpaste, you might absorb it across the inside of your mouth, or even swallow a little bit of it. So this chemical is something that we call a hormone disruptor. In other words, it interferes with your body's natural hormones. And in the case of Triclosan, it interferes with thyroid hormone, which is very important for the development of the brain and nervous system of a fetus and a young infant. So the scenario could be, a pregnant mom being really careful about not wanting to get sick, might wash her hands. She might buy a special antibacterial soap thinking that she's doing herself a favor by spending a little extra money on something like that. But she's exposed actually to a chemical that might interfere with the development of the brain of her baby. The long-term impacts of that are very subtle. It could be, things as subtle as a loss of a couple of IQ points, or maybe some mild learning or memory problems, things that you might not necessarily notice. It's not going to cause an overt birth defect. But Triclosan's not the only thyroid-disrupting chemical that we're exposed to every day, so all of these exposures add up. And
right.
The thing about Triclosan is it's just really something that we consider unnecessary.
Right,
this chemical in soap doesn't work any better than regular soap and water.
People should just stick to regular soap and water. And I understand that Triclosan is in our rivers and streams as well, so it's getting into our fish that we eat, so then we're getting another exposure that way. Is that accurate?
Well, it isn't. It is found in water, but it actually, for whatever reason, likes to accumulate more in the sediment than in the water. Mm-hmm. So, you can imagine you wash your hands with this soap. It goes down the drain. It ends up in the sewage treatment plant. And the sewage treatment itself, the treatments don't remove the Triclosan from the water before it's, left back out into the environment wherever it's discharged. And then what's left behind is the sewage sludge, which is very commonly treated and then used as fertilizer in agricultural fields. Mm-hmm. And so that sewage sludge has very high concentrations of these antibacterial chemicals. The other one that we're concerned about is something called triclocarban, which is used in deodorant bar soaps. And both Triclosan and triclocarban are found at pretty high concentrations in the sewage sludge, which are applied to ag fields. We know that earthworms that live in these fields can take up these chemicals, and of course the worms would be eaten by birds and then can make their way into the food chain. And then even more concerning, there was a study published just in the last month which demonstrated that these chemicals are taken up by the roots of plants and end up in that we eat. So in this example, it was soybeans. So Triclosan is actually making its way into the food chain, and is probably another reason that exposures in the general population have increased.
Now, what about if you're eating organic food? Will triclosan not be in that sludge? Can we be assured of that, or not necessarily sure?
Yeah, I'm not necessarily sure about that because I don't work on organic food, so I'm not sure what the standards are for use of sludge in organic food growing.
So, okay, well, good thing to know is to use soap and water, regular old soap and water, and stay away from the deodorants that contain that. So they should look for tricloban. Is that that's the word?
Triclocarban is the one that shows up in the deodorant bar soap, and triclosan is found in liquid hand soaps, toothpaste, body washes, body powders. It's actually also added to our clothing to prevent odors. So clothing that's marketed as being anti-odor or antibacterial, also the actual fabric is impregnated with the chemical.
Now, I also found it in dishcloths, to dish drying cloths. So that was kind of horrifying because I just wanted a regular old dishcloth, and there it was treated with triclosan. So
yeah, it's found in a lot of kitchen products, cutting boards, utensils. I've even heard that some kitchen counters now you can find that are made with it impregnated into the materials of the counters.
Wow. I'm speaking with Dr. Sarah Jansen on Your Supernatural Life here on Green 960. So tell us what other hormone disruptors, chemicals are there that we should be aware of?
Well, I spend a lot of my time working on chemicals found in consumer products that are hormone disruptors, and in particular I focus on bisphenol A, which is a chemical used to make polycarbonate plastic, and it's also used to make epoxy resin linings of food and beverage cans. And bisphenol A is of concern because it's another hormone-disrupting chemical. In this case, it mimics the female sex hormone estrogen, and it's been of concern because infants are the most highly exposed because of its use both in baby bottles and in liquid or prepared infant formula cans. And of course, as an estrogen-like chemical, this chemical can interfere with development of the reproductive system and actually has been shown also, at least in animal studies, to increase risk for cancer and to change the way that the brain develops so that there's long-term behavior changes. And bisphenol A, I think most parents are aware now of BPA-free baby bottles and sippy cups and also just adult reusable beverage containers. But I think a lot of people aren't aware that it's in your food cans. It's in all canned food and most canned beverages. So beer and soda, for example, have bisphenol A in the lining. And we all get a little bit of exposure whenever we eat canned food.
So are there any cans that don't have BPA, or are there? Do you have to look on the label? It says BPA.
This is something that doesn't appear on the label, and so you have to be aware of the companies which have made a commitment to be bisphenol A free. There are a handful of them. For example, one is Eden Foods. Eden Organics makes bean and tomato products. They've been able to develop an alternative that they've been using, I think, for at least 10 years for their canned bean products, but they haven't been able to make it work for their canned tomato products.
Because of the acid nature of it, I guess.
Exactly. So acidic foods are thought to have more bisphenol A in the lining than others, but some groups like Consumers Union and EWG have done canned food testing and actually found things like green beans tend to have higher levels of bisphenol A in them, and we aren't really sure why that is. I think it's just safe to assume that most canned food, unless you know that the manufacturer has made a commitment not to use it, will contain bisphenol A in the lining. And I'm not telling people that they shouldn't eat their green beans, because as a doctor, of course, I think you should eat your green beans.
Right.
But there's other ways to get them. You can, if you live in California, of course, we have access almost year-round to fresh fruits and vegetables. So you can buy fresh fruits and vegetables in season and eat them that way, or you can buy them frozen. The plastic bags, as far as we know, don't leach any chemicals into the frozen food inside. Right,
and what I've been doing for tomato sauce now, I've stopped buying canned tomatoes, and I buy them either in the paper packages or glass jars, and I feel better about that decision.
That's right. Unfortunately, I'm told that the lining of the lid of the glass jars might have some bisphenol A in it, but at least the levels of exposure are going to be much less than you would get from canned food.
Right. So aside from avoiding the plastic bottles and the cans, is there anything else we should know about to avoid coming in contact with BPA?
Well, there's also some surprising news that's come out recently that thermal paper receipts, the kinds of receipts you get when you pay for something with your credit card, those receipts are made with bisphenol A. And it's actually in pretty high concentrations that it shows up on the paper. So when you pay with your credit card, for example, at the gas station, at the gas pump, or when you get a receipt at the ATM, you can think about whether or not you really need to have that receipt, because there is suspicion and some emerging evidence that handling those receipts, you do get absorption of bisphenol A across your skin. If you do handle paper receipts, especially if you do it for work, you always want to make sure that you wash your hands thoroughly before you eat or drink anything.
Maybe wear gloves or something if that's your profession and you're handling receipts.
Yeah, that might also be something worth considering.